Hello, and thank you for taking the time out to watch our presentation on improving mental health and wellbeing support for Scotland students. This presentation shares key findings from new research commissioned by NUS Scotland in 2019 in response to the growing demand for mental health and wellbeing support among Scotland students. Our research took place between October 2019 and March 2020. It forms part of NUS Scotland's Think Positive project and was Scottish Government funded. The research is complete and the report will be available through NUS Scotland and Think Positive, but we are giving you the first look at our findings in this presentation. My name is Freya and I'm going to take you through some of the key highlights of the report with my colleague Barbara, and we're part of the BSV Associates team that undertook this research.
Let's have a look at the purpose of the research then. We looked at key factors which influence student mental health and well-being both positively and negatively. And we'd like to note the report identifies and defines mental health and well-being, and both aspects were included in our research. We also explore points across the student journey which tend to trigger poor mental health and well-being, and identify what current provisions in place across colleges and universities. So for the first time, we share insights into the student experience of it. This was a wide-ranging study and the first of its kind specifically focused on Scottish colleges and universities. And ultimately, we hope the findings of the research will support the college and university sectors in Scotland to further develop effective and appropriate practice in the delivery of mental health and wellbeing services to students. Now let's look at the methodology.
So our approach was made up of 3 strands of research. First, a thorough literature review to provide background, context, and key areas to explore through our research. Second, a survey open to all college and university students across Scotland. And we had a really amazing response of 3,097 student responses, including from 91% of all colleges and universities in Scotland, and with a good balance of further and higher education responses. So our thanks to students' associations, Think Positive and NUS Scotland for their efforts in promoting it on the ground. And finally, we did a consultation exercise with 8 Scottish institutions chosen to be a diverse sample of the sector, so different types of institutions and different geographies. And you can see those that were involved in the blue box on the slide. And we aim to find out what institutions and students' associations are providing to support student mental health and wellbeing, and what they think is effective, successful, or challenging. So now we're going to share our headline findings with you.
Okay, our sector-wide survey gave students a voice to talk about their mental well-being while they were studying. Contributions came from a really wide range of backgrounds and identities, levels of study and courses of study, both in college and university. Overwhelmingly, students report a positive experience and enjoyed positive impact from support they received from their colleges and universities, as well as other sources. The research highlighted the amount of effort and range of practice being delivered to support students' mental health and well-being. And the findings will support further development and enhance positive outcomes for students. Now, a look at factors influencing mental health and well-being.
So before we take you through our findings in regard to factors, it's important to highlight that the causes and triggers of poor student mental health and wellbeing are complex and highly individual, and are not confined to experiences at college or university. So this research could not seek to understand everything that contributes to poor mental health and wellbeing among students. However, it did identify a range of common areas that students told us were important to their mental health and wellbeing. First of all, then, the top factor reported as having a negative impact on mental health and well-being by students was financial pressures. Almost half of respondents identified that a lack of money or financial pressures can impact negatively. Relatedly, the need to undertake paid work was identified as a negative factor by just less than a quarter of respondents. However, more than a quarter of students indicated that receiving a bursary or other financial support from their college or university had had a positive impact on their mental health and well-being. So our key recommendation in relation to these findings is that although colleges and universities are experiencing increasing financial pressures currently, an exploration of different ways in which financial pressures for students can be best alleviated would be beneficial in regards to student mental health and wellbeing. Next, survey responses showed that factors related to students' programs of study, including adjusting to new ways of working, course workload, and pressure to achieve, are significant and have a negative impact on mental health and wellbeing for some. However, students also identified that support from tutors and lecturers, as well as curriculum design and learning, can be instrumental in enabling them to maintain good mental health and wellbeing, highlighting the central role of good learning and teaching practice and a mainstreamed approach to support in enabling students to positively maintain their mental health and wellbeing during their studies. So our recommendation here is that ensuring consistency in teaching and academic staff approach and practice will help to alleviate these programme factors for more students. Next, our survey findings highlighted the importance of relationships and social interaction to student wellbeing. Positive social interactions and relationships, particularly those with family and friends, were identified by students as important to maintaining their mental health and wellbeing. However, students who indicated they experienced loneliness or family difficulties found these to negatively impact their wellbeing. So our recommendation here is that institutions and students' associations ensure students have access to a range of opportunities which enable them to connect with others. Finally, our survey confirmed a positive link between physical activity and well-being. Maintaining good health through physical activity was identified as important, not only for health benefits, but also in relation to developing a sense of belonging as part of a community. However, around a third of students recognise their own poor physical health has impacted negatively, and a small number also identified alcohol consumption and drug use as having a negative impact on their mental well-being. Our recommendation in relation to this is that students' associations and other college and university functions which directly engage students socially and with physical activity have a key role to play in providing a broad range of opportunities for students to maintain their health and well-being. We also explored resilience and confidence in relation to mental health and well-being because published literature indicates that these may act as factors which protect mental health and well-being and positively influence how students cope with the stresses they encounter at college or university. Through our survey, we found students are armed with a range of attitudes and skills which enable them to be resilient in the face of the challenges they meet. Survey responses suggest quite high levels of strength, self-dependence, and perseverance, indicating that students are taking responsibility for themselves and their successes and failures. However, two factors identified by almost half of the respondents as areas of challenge were a lack of confidence and avoidance of undertaking tasks due to fear of failure. So we would recommend further consideration is given to how curriculum design and on-programme learning can promote confidence and enhance students' resilience. Now turning to points in the student journey that tend to trigger poorer mental health and well-being. So firstly, transition into college or university. So more than half of our survey respondents indicated they were impacted by or had concerns about their mental health or well-being in the first year of study. Less than half said this occurred in the second year of study, and numbers then fell significantly with each subsequent year. Similarly, students were proportionately more likely to access support for their mental health and well-being in their first year than second year, then increasingly less likely as studies progressed. So this indicates that transition into and early years of study are more likely than later years to be trigger points for negative impact on student mental health and well-being. Nevertheless, student comments confirm that maintaining access to support for students across all years of study remains important. And it's also important to note that for some, although the transition to college or university was a challenge, it was also a period of growth and positive development. Interestingly, across all years, for those students who accessed support, the points at which they were most likely to do so were the start of the academic year, during the first semester, and at all points of assessment. For students in their second year or onwards, assignments and exam times are notably significant, suggesting added pressure regarding attainment as years progressed.
Okay, let's have a look at student awareness of support. Very positively, the majority of respondents were aware of at least some, if not all, of the services on offer at their place of study, particularly core support services, though fewer further than higher education students were aware. Lower levels of student awareness of online provision was noted. Our research was undertaken prior to the COVID pandemic, but online provision is an area of both growth and need in the light of changing study environments due to COVID. Increasing awareness and the profile of all available services would enable an increased number of students to access the support that's right for them and when they need it. Let's look next at how students have been accessing support. Of the 3,097 survey respondents, less than half of them in our sample who had a diagnosed condition or who had concerns about their mental health actually accessed support, indicating that far fewer students are accessing support than may benefit from it, echoing the finding of low uptake of services in a range of earlier research studies. Students between the ages of 18 to 29 and those who are carers, care experienced, or estranged are more likely to access support. Those who are more reluctant to access support are male students, heterosexual students, and students with a diagnosed mental health condition. We found that for the majority of our respondents, their reasons for not accessing support were affirmative, because they were confident in their mental well-being, or because they could access support through their own networks. However, some reported they did not access support for negative reasons such as stigma. Moving on, let's look at the sources of support. Our survey asked students where they looked for the support they needed and what type of support they sought in relation to maintaining their mental health and well-being, both internal and external to their place of study. Family and friends were identified as a significant source of support, particularly where students needed to talk things through. Of note is that family support is not available to care leavers or estranged students. Unsurprisingly, college and university-based services and teaching staff were also identified as important sources of support, with institutions and also the NHS being the primary point of access to counselling and talking therapies. We wanted to look at how long students are waiting to access supports. Not unexpectedly, survey findings indicate that waiting times for both and NHS support were high, with just over half of our respondents waiting more than a month to access a service. This is due to multiple factors, including types of service available, the process of diagnosis, and a strain on services or lack of resource. In the next slide on support, we looked also at the quality of and impact from support for students. Students were positive about the quality of report they received and its impact on mental health and well-being and on their ability to succeed in their studies. Our survey identified no differences between further and higher education students, nor between protected characteristic groups, with the exception of for Black, Asian and minority ethnic students, whose responses indicated that their experiences of support were poorer than their white peers, though they reported greater impact on success than their white peers. Further inquiry into this would be beneficial, as it's important we properly understand how Black, Asian and minority ethnic students are experiencing student support services in order to improve them. It's also important to better understand the experiences of all students who do not have a good experience. So research to gain a deeper understanding of the experiences will facilitate the development of practices which will benefit all students. I'm handing back over now to look at an overview of the range of provision in colleges and universities.
So finally, we wanted to give you an overview of the key areas of work to support student mental health and well-being undertaken by colleges and universities that were identified from our consultation exercise. It's very clear that there is a significant amount of work going on within institutions to support student mental health and well-being, reflecting considerable efforts and investment being made in this area. And this slide here offers a flavour of the key themes for your reference. And please take a look at the full report for detailed information and institutional examples. We include a detailed compendium of practice by theme, which we hope will be a real resource for colleges and universities and students' associations. And finally, by way of conclusion, we offer some areas identified for development through our research. So firstly, better partnership working. So the development of student mental health agreements between students' associations and their institutions via the Think Positive project is a very positive development and paves the way for enhanced partnership working between institutions and student associations to support student mental health and well-being. These relationships are at an early stage, but there is opportunity for them to be strengthened, and we see student mental health agreements as key vehicles for this. Research and evaluation then. While, as I said, there's a huge amount of activity going on to support student mental health and well-being, and our research suggests it does make a difference for students, the monitoring and evaluation of the full breadth of this activity is not consistent. It's most well established in relation to high-level monitoring of student statistics and evaluation of counselling services, but it's less consistent across the breadth of provision being offered. So development in this area will help to build the evidence base of what works to support student mental health and well-being. Additionally, our research findings indicate a range of areas which really merit some further focused research at both sector and institutional level to help enhance provision for the future. And you can find those areas outlined in our report. Next, capacity building for staff. So our findings suggest a need for institutions to enable all teaching and student-facing staff to proactively embed consideration of mental health and well-being in their work. Through expanding on current provision of training and professional development opportunities and making sure these are taken up by all relevant staff, staff can expand their knowledge of mental health and well-being and enhance their practice to the benefit of all students. Reducing stigma around mental health. So our findings suggest that work to address stigma surrounding mental health is still required. While this area of work features consistently in student mental health agreements, institutions and students' associations should develop further collaborative work to address these issues. Taking account of institutional or sector-wide evidence, it would be helpful to implement communications strategies to overcome myths or stereotypes about who support is or is not for, assure students of confidentiality, and reduce stigma around seeking help. Finally, taking account of factors and trigger points. So we've highlighted a range of factors and points in the student journey which are important to mental health and well-being for many students. And while there's already much work going on, it would be helpful for both institutions and students' associations to review how their provision currently takes account of these factors and trigger points and any other relevant points and factors for their students to enable them to enhance and hone and refine what they are doing to support students.
So, NUS Scotland and Think Positive will be making our report available. Please check it out. Thank you so much for listening.